standards at BFTC. If you want to chase down a bad guy and put him in handcuffs, you better be able to do a pull-up.
The reason I ask is that there are concerns about whether or not being able to do these kinds of harsh pull-ups is really required of FBI agents.
Doing one pull-up is not hard.
This may look like a debate over fitness standards, but it's actually a referendum on what federal power is meant to prioritize. What's really being tested here is whether national security institutions are being reshaped by political values rather than operational necessity. This raises broader questions about neutrality, readiness, and the limits of reform inside agencies entrusted with force. In this video, we'll break down how a dispute over hiring rules reveals a deeper struggle over control, loyalty, and the future mission of the FBI.
Dr. Patel, the FBI is meant to be the tip of the spear in combating terrorism against the United States from both foreign and domestic sources. It's also our lead agency in fighting the hackers who target our businesses and critical infrastructure. But instead of a specialized role fighting these kinds of terrorists, hackers, and spies, you have the FBI playing the role of local police and helping with immigration enforcement. I'm going to move on to my... you've been asked some questions about changes to your hiring standard, and including college degrees and possibly the age. But one question I had is that you are now requiring applicants to be able to do a certain kind of pull-ups, which a lot of women cannot because of physiological differences. Are you requiring these kinds of pull-ups?
We are requiring a physical program at BFTC at Quantico because FBI agents carrying guns in the field have to chase down bad guys and do really hard work. The physical fitness standards of those agents
are you requiring these kinds of pull-ups?
We are requiring everybody to pass the 1811 standards at BFTC. If you want to chase down a bad guy and put him in handcuffs, you better be able to do a pull-up.
The reason I ask is that there are concerns about whether or not being able to do these kinds of harsh pull-ups is really required of FBI agents.
Doing one pull-up is not harsh, and there are always medical exemptions to that.
I am gravely concerned by the state of the FBI under your control. And in fact, you are willing to take a cut on your agency of almost $500 million. So the FBI is losing dedicated employees, decades of expertise and specialization, leading to loss to early retirements, firings, and reassignments to immigration enforcement or conducting local police work. Thousands have already left. For as long as you remain as the head of the FBI, I fear the number of departures and summary firings will continue to grow. Mr. Patel, before the vote on your nomination of this committee, I noted that your most significant qualification, this is not just something that I noted, but others, your most significant qualification was your 100% loyalty to President Trump. And I fear that that continues to be the motivating factor in your position as FBI director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, Mr. Chairman.
Director Patel, did you have
Yes.
anything you wanted to say now?
That is an entire falsehood. You can delete my 16 years of government service to multiple administrations all you want. The fact is that I was a public defender. I was a national security prosecutor. I was a House intelligence staffer. I was a deputy director of intelligence. I was a chief of staff to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense. I led the counterterrorism missions for the White House. Those are just some of the jobs I held in my 16-year career. There was no loyalty then. There's no loyalty now to anything but the Constitution.
Senator Brett.
Yes, well, before...
What unfolded in that moment was more than a dispute over physical standards. It was a collision between two competing visions of what federal law enforcement is supposed to be and who it is meant to serve. When the question of a single pull-up was raised, framed as an insurmountable barrier that a lot of women cannot overcome, the hearing shifted from bureaucratic oversight into something far more revealing, because Dr. Patel did not answer with abstraction or political evasion. He answered with blunt clarity. If federal agents are expected to run toward danger, to pursue suspects, to place handcuffs on someone resisting arrest, then basic physical capability is not a suggestion, it is a requirement. That response cut through the room. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was rooted in reality. What followed exposed a deeper tension that has been simmering beneath the surface of Washington for years. The question was no longer about fitness standards at Quantico. It was about whether federal institutions should adapt themselves to political pressure or whether political pressure should bend to the realities of the job. Senator Hirono's line of questioning widened quickly. The focus shifted from pull-ups to funding cuts, from training standards to morale, from recruitment to loyalty. The implication was clear that the FBI, under Patel's leadership, was being hollowed out. That experienced personnel were leaving. That expertise was being lost. And that the motive behind it all was allegiance. Not to the institution, not to the mission, but to a political figure. That accusation landed heavy, and it was not subtle. To say that someone's defining qualification is loyalty to a president is to challenge the legitimacy of every decision they make. It reframes policy disagreements as moral failures. It suggests that professionalism itself has been replaced by obedience. And yet, Patel did not retreat. He responded not with rhetoric, but with a resume. 16 years across multiple administrations, public service in different branches, roles that demanded judgment, independence, and accountability, intelligence work, national security responsibilities, leadership positions that required balancing law, policy, and consequence. And then came the line that crystallized the entire exchange. There was no loyalty then. There's no loyalty now to anything but the Constitution. That sentence matters because at its core, this hearing was not about fitness tests or hiring pipelines. It was about the nature of authority in the American system. Who sets the standards? Who enforces them? And what happens when those standards collide with political narratives? Federal law enforcement exists in a difficult space. It is expected to be effective, restrained, accountable, and impartial, all at once. It must confront real-world threats while operating under intense public scrutiny. And it must do so without bending to partisan convenience. Physical requirements are not symbolic. They are practical. They reflect the realities of the job. When those requirements are challenged not on operational grounds, but on ideological ones, it signals a shift in priorities. A move away from function toward optics. And that is where this moment becomes larger than a single hearing. Because the argument wasn't really about whether one pull-up is too much to ask. It was about whether standards themselves are negotiable when they become politically uncomfortable. It was about whether institutions are expected to redefine competence to avoid controversy, or whether controversy is sometimes the cost of maintaining competence. When Patel spoke about agents needing to chase suspects, to restrain them, to perform physically demanding tasks in unpredictable environments, he was describing the unglamorous reality of enforcement. Not theory, not policy papers, reality. And when concerns were raised about departures, funding cuts, and reassignment of personnel, it highlighted a separate but connected issue: the strain placed on institutions when they are pulled in too many directions at once. The FBI cannot be everything to everyone. When it is asked to act as national security apparatus, cyber defense force, local policing support, and immigration partner all at once, resources thin, focus blurs, and morale suffers. Those are legitimate concerns. But they are not resolved by lowering standards or questioning motives. They are resolved through clarity of mission and honesty about what the job demands. What made this exchange resonate was not the sharpness of the words, but the clarity of the divide. On one side, a belief that institutions must adapt to social expectations, even if that means redefining readiness. On the other, a belief that readiness itself is non-negotiable, because the consequences of failure are real. And underlying it all was the question of trust. Trust in leadership, trust in institutions, trust that decisions are being made for the right reasons. When Patel rejected the accusation of personal loyalty and anchored himself to the Constitution, he was invoking the foundational promise of public service, that no matter who is in power, the law stands above personalities. That allegiance is owed not to individuals, but to principles. That promise is easy to say. It is harder to maintain, especially in an era where every decision is filtered through political interpretation. This hearing did not resolve those tensions. It exposed them. It showed how quickly operational decisions become ideological flashpoints, how standards become symbols, and how leadership is judged not just by outcomes, but by perceived allegiance. For the public watching, the takeaway is not about pull-ups. It is about the kind of government we expect, one that prioritizes effectiveness even when it is uncomfortable. Or one that reshapes itself to avoid friction, even when that reshaping carries consequences. These moments matter because they reveal the fault lines. They show us where principles are tested, where institutions are strained, and where accountability must be demanded. And that is why we watch. That is why we document. That is why we analyze. Because democracy does not erode all at once. It shifts in moments like these, in hearings, in exchanges, in the quiet redefinition of standards. If you believe these moments deserve scrutiny, context, and truth without distortion, support our work. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.